Climb aboard. This is the Miles to Go podcast. And now here's your host, Ed Pizza.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Miles to Go podcast. After a week on the road, I am back at home, buried in the snow. Mr. Kerr, I know you have snow as well, given that incredible sledding experience that I saw by your son.
I don't know if it's sledding, it was launching yourself off the top of a hill and fully trusting the dollar store blow up, but there you go. You had a great time.
And about 3/4 of an inch of snow, too.
Yeah.
There was a lot of green. There was a lot of green on that mountain.
Now all ice. It is 18 degrees when we woke up this morning. Everything has frozen to solid sheets of ice. Everything's canceled down here this morning, so a lot of excitement in Georgia when you get any kind of snow like that, or any snow period.
I'm sure it didn't mess up anything at the airport, which we will be talking about my airport experience in a brief moment.
There was a 757 Delta evacuation on the runway the morning that it snowed here a couple of days ago because of a engine issue during the takeoff roll. Not sure still why they evacuated the plane. Yeah. Maybe standard procedure for whatever happened, but a couple of injuries again, as always, people going down the slide. A lot of people carrying bags down the slide. A lot of people immediately reaching for that phone before they're at the end of the slide. And it just once again gives me faith that, man, maybe we've really messed up this whole society thing.
Yeah, I always struggle with, I'm absolutely taking my passport with me, if I get off of a plane and slide, especially if I'm out of a foreign country. So it's,
in my pocket during the takeoff roll every time.
Well, that's what I say. I don't keep it in my pocket for the takeoff roll. So it's sort of that's my weak spot. If we're having an emergency landing, I'm taking it out and putting it in my pocket, but I don't leave it in my pocket during takeoff roll. So maybe I need to do that.
I leave it in my pocket, man, because I am out. When everybody starts to freak out, me and whoever's with me will be in the hand behind me, and we are gone, man, down that slide.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about airline customer policies today, including airline customer size policies, based on some stuff that you dug up on Reddit of all places. A very civil and friendly discussion about the issue. We have a little bit of housekeeping to get to, and as you mentioned with your son sledding, I also had an interesting snow moment that we'll go over. And if we get a little bit of time, there's some very odd news about the incredibly sad crash of the Jeju Airlines 737 that we'll touch on. So a lot of different stuff to cover this week. A little bit of housekeeping. You can text us 571-293-6659. You can also leave us a voicemail there. Email ed@pizzainmotion.com. I think that TikTok will still be available by the time this episode goes live at the Miles to Go podcast on both Instagram and TikTok. He is at Kerr on all those social media channels, and I am at Pizza in Motion. Mr. Kerr, we have some housekeeping. I don't know if you know this, but we are in a new year, 2025.
I knew that much. Yeah,
you did. Okay, all right. So we've decided that we're going to continue to innovate with the show. We want to continue to bring only the best of what's out there to our show, and so our listeners started only being able to listen to two incredibly photogenic individuals, and we decided that we needed to bring the show to video so folks could see the video. And we've now, in a new partnership with the NFL, we've instituted instant replay. And so, we each get one challenge per episode. And I'm challenging last week. I'm throwing the metaphorical red flag. I got a red envelope here, so I'm waving the red envelope for folks that are listening. And this claim that we'd already read the review from last week is what I'm challenging. And so we're going to throw it, because it's playoffs. We couldn't throw it to New York. They don't have the capacity there. So we are throwing it to Cleveland, Ohio, to producer Jeremiah to review the video and tell us whether you are correct that this review was read on a previous episode or not. So referee Jeremiah, take it away.
Hey, Edward. Hey, Richard. Thanks for bringing me in on the challenge. We got to look at a couple things when we look at a challenge like this. Richard is claiming that 2 episodes ago, this same review was read. Well, that was episode 366. And you can go back to 364 and see clearly there was never even a review read. I can show you that right here. We're going to take a look right here. So this is a transcription of that episode. There's no review read. I can scroll through the timeline on this session. Also, no sign of a review, nothing put on a graphic, nothing there. So first part of the claim is false. Second part of the claim is that it was the same review that was read. Now, there was a review read that mentioned Disney. We can go all the way back to episode 359. So this is like 7 weeks earlier. But you can see here, clearly the author is a different author than the review that was read in episode 366. They do mention Disney, but they don't mention your names. So, Richard, I'm sorry. Your claim is false. Ed, you have won this challenge. You keep your time out and your challenge. Whatever we're doing here, let's just get back to the show because that's enough of me.
All right, well, there you have it, folks. Indisputable video evidence from Jeremiah. I retain my challenge for the rest of the episode since I was correct. So, Mr. Curry, you lose a timeout, and here we are.
Apparently, we just discussed that over chat and over text and not on a previous episode.
Yeah, well.
But I'm still going to flail around like crazy on the sidelines and demand that we got it wrong and we did. But so there you go.
There you go. Well, I think that'll work out perfectly for when the Falcons meet the Giants next week in the NFC Championship game.
Cancun, as they say. That's where everybody's already in the off season.
Yep. All right, so I want to touch a little bit about snow, and then let's get into this airline policy stuff. So, you and I have flown God knows how many times, and fair number of times in the wintertime. I've flown in snowy conditions. We had a business in Denver for years. But I had an incident this past week that I really never experienced before. And it was one that had the added stress of knowing that the crew was about to time out. So I was flying to Vegas, someplace new. And since it was CES, United always rolls out the big boys for CES. Dulles is a big connecting hub for European travelers coming to CES. So we always have wide bodies added to the schedule. Grab one of those wide bodies. I was sitting in 1A, 1 Alpha on a 772, which is the facing backwards seat. They closed us all up at one point, and then ultimately we couldn't push back. The captain came on, was very informative. Couldn't push back because they were plowing. But it was snowing, but not a ton of snow. So we waited some more, and they started talking about how crew timeout was a real possibility. And then all of a sudden, all the crew starts running around, all the flight attendants, which is, cue for, oh my gosh, we really are going to time out if we can't get the door closed. And if I remember correctly, I think so flight attendants are, based on door close, but the pilots are based on, total time, in the cockpit, takeoff, that sort of stuff. So they're like a lot of different variables here that even once the door is closed, we're not necessarily off the hook, because if we get stuck for too long on the ground, then the pilots are going to time out. We're going to have to come back to the gate, which you just had happen
last year on the threshold of the runway. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So with all this going on, I'm like, gosh, I got to be there. Like, I've got a full week of meetings. I can't afford to be there tomorrow.
Go.
Exactly. We're just waiting. And so they close everything up. And as you well know, it's like when you're in that rush, it's like they close up and the tug starts pushing back. And out of the angle of my seat at a 1A, I can see the wing walker with the lighted batons, and he's standing there, and then he kind of like steps like 5 or 10 feet closer to the plane, and then he backs off again, and then he goes closer to the gate, and then he swaps the batons with another person. They're all just like sort of sauntering around, and I'm like, this, like, something does not make sense. And then for the first time in my life, I hear this noise, and it sounds like a kid's toy engine revving over and over again. And it's like, holy cow, that's the tug. And there's obviously not enough traction.
Spinning wheels.
I can hear the tug trying to push back the 772. Now, like, here we are. If it was any other weekend, it would be a 737, and we probably wouldn't have this problem because of the tug we were pushing a
little bit lighter of an aircraft.
A little bit lighter. I kid you not. I know you've been in a situation before where you're stuck in the snow and you start going forward and reverse with the car to get enough momentum, and the 772 starts nudging back and forth. And I'm looking at the jet bridge, and we're going back and forth.
There's other wing walkers down there throwing bags of kitty litter underneath the tires. Come on, man, let's go.
And you could see things like slowly the rocking motion gets bigger and bigger, and then finally we start pushing back. And we get like halfway back, and another plane starts to come from the other directions in between the D and the C concourse, and the tug has to slow down. And of course, then it's like, oh god, no, we're not going to get going again, and we get stuck again on the pushback. And they finally I think, as you well know, and probably anybody here listening who's been on a plane before, if you've noticed this, that with very few exceptions, when the tug pushes you back, they push you back into a position that is at this point called perpendicular to the gates. So your nose is pointed straight where you're going. We were not pointed straight. I can totally see the guys down below going, okay, we lost our momentum. The plane is in the taxiway. It's straight enough. We're going to stop here, and the pilots are going to have to turn this because the tug just couldn't get traction again. And it was such a bizarre thing to hear this tug's engine just like full on, like we are going to drop a rod if we can't get this plane moved.
So Dulles did a great job treating the taxiways, brining it before the snow and clearing it once the snow started so that there was no ice or anything.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they get A for effort on this effort. And not a lot of snow, but we don't get a lot of snow at Dulles. And so, yeah, it was a little bit touch and go. We weren't sure we were going to make it, but I've never seen or heard a tug have that kind of an issue.
Atlanta Airport on Friday got about 1.5 inches of snow, which is what we got here at my house. And yeah, complete chaos. I think they're still recovering today. Several hundred flights canceled. Again, had some buddies text me that were like, yeah, I'm trying to get out. I'm like, dude, why is it a funeral or a wedding? No, then just go home. Atlanta, you don't mess with the snow down here in the South.
Yeah. Well, no, I get that. And unfortunately, as you well know, we've talked about off the air, there were some pretty serious stuff going on for me this week. So it was one of those ones where I had to get out. And quite frankly, I'm not sure, in a lot of other scenarios, I'm not sure I do go. Not because I don't think it's a safety issue.
Dulles is more equipped than Atlanta for handling snow.
It is, yes. But I mean, it's not Denver for sure. So, I didn't expect it to be great, but I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was for sure. So
also DFW had big problems with the snow as well. They sent out at one point whatever the text message is to the pilots that says out of de-icing solution and like closing the runway. I was like, ooh.
I don't understand how you run out of de-icing solution.
But then they came back and said, no, that's not true. But then pilots chimed in and were like, here's a picture of the text message in the cockpit. That's what they did send. I don't know. Yeah, we're pretty bad at snow here in the South. Which, to be fair, it has not snowed in 6 years here. So why spend all that money and stuff for 6 years not to be used, for one day?
But DFW does have the occasional ice storm. So, I mean, and de-icing solution last time I checked doesn't expire. So
some nasty stuff.
It is some nasty stuff. All right, 2 other housekeeping things very quickly, and then we'll get to our meat and potatoes topics here. First off, thanks to Lisa, a listener of the show, for sending in. For folks who don't follow my blog, I actually managed to blog this week in a fairly consistent fashion, almost like it was 2015 again. United had a week's worth of deals, and each day was a different discounted coach cities: London, Frankfurt, Amsterdam. Anyway, she was nice enough to send a screenshot after they closed down the week of deals, and I'll put the screenshot up for the show. Our weed of deals has ended. So I don't know who's smoking it over there at United, but our weed has ended.
Hey, but they did score 3 business class seats home from Brussels, thanks to whatever United space they decided to let go. Of course, I did not book it via United. I booked it via Aeroplan. Mm-hmm. But that was a great tip I had forgotten about that you reminded me of. Families got to get home from the UK for business. The space was there as well. Everything was London, Newark, Atlanta, one stop, 3-hour connection, perfect in business. But of course, the UK passenger departure surcharge, whatever they call it,
UK
like $250 a person, and then they throw more. So it was like literally like $500 a person to fly business class. So old Uncle Ed was like, "Remember Brussels?" And I was like, "Oh yes." And everybody forgets about Brussels.
Are you now that
sure enough?
I will say the only thing about Brussels, which is the channel's not cheap. So if you're just doing it to reposition, it may not be cheaper. But if you're going to go spend a few days in Paris, Amsterdam, whatever, they both have easy trains to Brussels.
Yeah, this is going to be exciting. So I cannot be gone for 2 weeks because of work. So
really?
I'm going for the week with the family. I am departing from the UK.
Oh.
Mrs. Kerr and the children are staying by themselves for the first time in Europe to get another week out, and then they will slowly position via train or short flights to Brussels to depart because they've never been to Belgium. I have been to Belgium, so I don't feel left out. But they're going to go somewhere else after London, and then they're going to spend a couple days in Brussels before they depart back on 70,000 Airplane points and $130 a person. And I got those Airplane points via the built 150% transfer bonus. So like absurdly cheap for the family to fly business class home, thanks to Aeroplan and Built.
I love it. Yep. For folks that don't know, Brussels BRU is a nice, easy airport to get out of that usually has a bunch of availability. Geneva is another one as well, if you can position to Geneva, though that's a little bit further afield from London, obviously. But those are 2 airports that generally have a decent amount of business class capacity back to the U.S. Last housekeeping bit, Mr. Kerr, when we closed out the year, I was a little bit of a dummy, and our social media person got her name changed. And so just for those folks who know her from the Slack community, she is not Austin, she is Auburn. And I meant to correct that last week and did not, like an idiot. And so here we are, mea culpa. I actually do remember your name, and I am going to say it correctly this time.
Everybody furiously searching the Slack group for Austin. Who's Austin?
All right. So with all that, you were down a Reddit rabbit hole, and
It happens.
and because of that Reddit rabbit hole, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 links early this morning before time of recording. You want to tee this one up for me, Mr. Kerr?
Yeah, I will. We're going to talk about this as empathetically and as sensitive as we can, but I think it's a problem now. It's going to continue to be a bigger problem in the way that America's going. And I just don't see it addressed very often. And I think as Ed's going to make, I don't think the airlines are addressing it either. So let's talk about the customer of size policies for different airlines. And I want to talk about this topic from 3 different standpoints. 1 is from the airline standpoint. 2 is from a passenger who fits inside of their seat. 3 is from a customer of size and what they need to do in situations. But I'm going to just bear with me briefly, read 30-second story that I have just continued to read over and over and over again.
I don't mean to laugh, but it's such a predictable. Well, anyway, I'll hold off.
Yeah. All right.
No
So this
soapbox
is
yet,
from
right?
the United Airlines Reddit subthread. Says, last minute business travel, booked only aisle seat left on the plane before travel. I'm an average sized adult male. I can sit in the middle seat, but I never do. When I arrived at my seat, I noticed the middle seat passenger was large and that it was not possible for me to sit in my seat without leaning significantly into the aisle. I found a flight attendant a few rows back and discreetly described the issue. She immediately responded, quote, "Full flight, nothing I can do." I asked her to at least observe the issue before responding. She followed me to the seat, and when I sat and asked the guy next to me if he could scoot in more, he tried, but I was also at this point now clearly humiliated. She began to walk off the flight attendant. I told her I was not okay with this, and she again said, "Full flight, I can't create a new seat." I told her that I would make a complaint to UA on landing and asked for her name. She then took this situation seriously. Flight attendant went to the front of the plane and briefed the purser. Purser walks to my seat, addresses me loudly by name, and asked me what the problem is. I told the purser I'd rather not go over it again because he'd already been briefed, and it was awkward to discuss this now, and the middle seat passenger is clearly humiliated, and I am now embarrassed. Summarize the seat assignment violated policy. He responded, the purser, "What policy?" I said, "The one that permits me to have a seat free from significant encroachment." He said he could do nothing other than call a ground-based customer resolution representative. By this time, I was uncomfortable, embarrassed. Cannot imagine how the middle seat passenger felt. Time passed, no resolution. Specialist came, boarding ended, departure time passed. People nearby began to speculate the plane was held up because I complained about my seat. 20 minutes later, after departure time, a woman walks onto the plane. She was reading from a screen. She never introduced herself and looked up. She pushed paper boarding past my face and says, "You're being moved. It's an aisle." She walks away. No one ever said anything else to me. Message loud and clear: if you complain about policy violations, you're a problem, and you'll be treated as one. To such an extent, you'll be embarrassed and made uncomfortable in front of other passengers in hopes that you'll relent in pressing your concern. And this is just a story that it's now popping up in my Reddit feed every day again. The Reddit algorithm has me nailed down. It just shows me every airline subreddit and the hottest post in every subreddit. And this is one that is, popping up more and more. First of all, I say this as not a passenger of size as far as the airline is concerned. I don't have any problem fitting into an airline seat, but I am not a small guy. You, on the other hand, are a smaller guy that definitely fits into all of the airline seats, right?
Yeah.
Like, no problem sitting in a seat or using a regular seatbelt for me, but if I'm in a middle seat, man, my shoulders there's nowhere to go. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a big dude.
You're not 17 inches wide. Yes. Your shoulders are more than 17 inches wide.
Like, I don't know what to do. So here's the question. We're going to go through the major airlines policies that I found online and read. I just wanted to educate myself. Mm-hmm. But from hearing that story, and I know you've heard and read several other stories like this, and just quite frankly, this is the way that America is going. People are just going to continue to get bigger until a whole lot of other things happen that change that from a health standpoint. So I want to look at it from the airline's point of view. I want to look at it from the person's point of view, like you and I, who do fit, and then from educating a customer of size, what they should do. First of all, what has been your experience? Have you ever had this happen to you? And more importantly, on this first point, what should the airlines be doing, if anything, about this? And the plane manufacturers.
Yeah, I have had this happen to me. I'll be honest, I didn't make a big stink about it. To your point, I'm not a big dude, and so I can, I can scooch over to the other side of a seat. But I've definitely had, a fair number of people who have, the terms that the airlines use is encroaching. And so typically speaking, all the policies have different words in them, but the general rule of thumb is if you can't get the armrests down, then you need a second seat. Now, beyond that, there are people who are able to get the armrest down, but are obviously still significantly encroaching into the seat beside them. And I see that fairly frequently when I travel, and I generally lean a little bit into the aisle. Unlike you, I don't have broad shoulders. That's probably the one area that's, where I can get away with it. And if I'm in the window seat, I'll just slide because I don't want to cause the issue. To your point, when you read the story, I felt really bad for the person in the middle seat. Because here's the thing. I think you and I know these policies to some degree. I've always known Southwest has one of the what I would call the more straightforward and empathetic policies. And in terms of how to handle a customer size. I think, most people only travel once or twice a year, so they probably don't know the policy. And I think take it a step further, while there are people of size of every age, I think you'd agree as a country, the older you are, the more likely you are to be obese. And so are our parents reading the customer of size policies? There's no way. So I think that there's a large contingent of folks who are customer of size who are also unaware of the policy, and so they get on the plane without the knowledge, and that creates this unfortunate situation.
Should the airlines or plane manufacturers be making seats larger, as people, it seems over time and a very short history, are themselves becoming larger on average?
No, I don't think seats should be larger. I do think that the airlines should have a much more cohesive process for how you can purchase a second seat. I just think that's, it's not hard. And I think Southwest has always done a good job of it. Now with open seating, it was always easier. It was just you get a second seat coupon. So that part was easier. It's harder on most of their airlines. Though I will say, I just learned this on United recently, that United has made it disgustingly easy to purchase a second seat. It didn't used to be this way, but I have a friend of mine whose mom broke her knee. And so they were getting ready for a big family vacation. She had to have her leg propped up. And I mean, it took me all of, 5 minutes to walk them through how to book one with United, but they're the only one that makes it ezy right now. You're still paying for a full other seat.
You're still paying for a full other seat. I'll go through the policies here in a second.
Yeah.
My opinion on this is I think air travel demand has never been higher, as we see from load factors, despite the fact that most airlines have made it pretty miserable to sit in economy
They
seat.
really have.
Low-cost carriers, you're talking 29-inch seat pitch. You don't have to be a customer size to be uncomfortable. You can be any of us. And, however, those planes are largely still full. So until the public demands, through speaking with their wallet, that the experience get better, the airlines are going to continue to do everything they can to fit as many seats as possible on a plane. There's another side of this, which is the really uncomfortable part that a lot of people bring up and want to talk about, which is personal responsibility of if you have gotten to this size that you have to deal with all the ramifications of this. And that includes, hey, now you've got to fork over the cost of 2 seats if you want to get on an airplane. And that's, kind of a reality of it. Now there's a lot of medical issues and other things that can happen to people that is well outside of their control, which I think is, for that reason, unfair to make a blanket statement that this is all about personal responsibility. But it's pretty clear that as Americans, especially here in the South, we all have a problem. I say this as somebody who spends 150 days on the road a year trying to get healthy every single time. But again, if I ever got to a place where that seatbelt wouldn't work, man, the panic button on the inside would be so big that I think it would, drive a lot more of that behavior. So that's kind of the yucky bit about this that should be and can be debated for a lot longer.
Yeah. For what it's worth on that point, I just want to say, I 100% get that and agree with you. I think, this is where I think the airlines, by avoiding the issue, turn it into a bigger one than it needs to be. You mentioned medical conditions. There are probably literally thousands of different medical conditions that could contribute to stuff like this. So this doesn't just have to be about you ate too much. It really is a matter of, look, I mean, the way I see it, it's if you had a bag that was if you try to bring a cello onto a plane, we remember this, we joke about that Delta thing that happened a number of years ago, the guy's bringing a cello on a plane. It's got to go somewhere. And so I think that there's a way for the crew, the gate agents before the person gets on the plane, to manage this process. And they just choose not to. Yeah,
because from a human standpoint, it's incredibly uncomfortable to talk about. But unfortunately, that's your job as a gate agent.
Right. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about, but it's better to talk about it in the gate area than it is to talk about it on the plane.
Yeah. If we really want to talk about it, we can talk about how the only way that a low-income family in America can afford to feed their kids and their family is by buying horrible food, because that's the only thing that's affordable in the stores today in the supply chain. But that's a topic for a different day.
That's a 3-hour episode.
Yes, it's a 3-hour episode. So let me quickly go through the policies. I'm going to start from what I perceive, in my personal opinion, as worst laid out to best laid out. I went through all the airlines' websites this morning. I saw what I could find. So with that, let's start with Delta, because Ed, I could not find a policy published on their public website, nor could the chat agent that I went to and asked for help, whose response when I asked for their customer size policy was just to confirm you're asking about the checked baggage policy. And I was like, well, there's probably a lot of baggage in this.
Screenshots
but
of
no.
Jeremiah will suck them in. They're pretty horrible.
And I was like, nope. And then we went back and forth a few times. I used the Google. I used the claw.ai. As far as I can tell, there is no published policy on Delta's public website. What I did find was something on their pro website, which is for travel agents that kind of lays their policy out. But to your point, I think not even having a very clearly defined and published policy is a problem in the first place, because now people who do not travel very often just don't know what to do. So let's get that fixed, Delta. Going down or in order, next best or next worst is American Airlines, who on their special assistance page, so again, not a dedicated page, if you scroll almost all the way to the bottom, there's an extra space during travel that basically says, if you need more than one seat to travel safely and comfortably, you need to book an additional seat by calling reservations. If you didn't book a seat in advance, you got to ask an airport agent. If you can't accommodate your needs, you're going to have to buy seats on a different flight at the same price as your original seats. And that's it. Like, that's all it says, which doesn't really give people much to go off of, so you got to call. After that is United, which does have a full page of extra seats that's, starts to get into some details here that basically says, if you can't buckle your seatbelt, even with the seatbelt extender, if the armrests don't stay down in your seat, or if you're in the space of the seat next to you, then you're going to have to buy a second seat, or you're going to have to move up to a premium cabin by, again, paying for an upgrade. And to Ed's point, the United website has made this incredibly easy to buy a second seat and label it as a second seat for a passenger. Not hard. So good job here by United to fix it with technology, which is what everybody should do. Like, if you're telling people to call, don't like that. And it even lays out here on the United website what to do with that. It even says, hey, here's the bag policy. Here, let me tell you about movable armrests, and find your type list of planes where you can see which rows have movable aisle armrests. Good job, United, here. So next to the best, not surprising once we get into these brands, right, is Alaska Airlines, which very clearly at the top of this page says customer size seating guidelines, and goes to a lot of detail, including a very robust Q&A section that really tells somebody everything they need to do. And what I like about, this is, if you buy a second seat, which you're required to do with Alaska, but that seat, that plane goes out with extra seats after your flight, you can request a refund, because that seat was going to be empty anyways, and you can get a refund for that second seat that you bought. So they're basically saying, in my opinion, if you do your job and your homework and we do our job, then we can meet together here and we'll give you a refund, and everybody, will end up happy. Now,
yeah.
If that flight's full, then your customer size, I would tell you, go look for the Alaska flight that looks like it's going to go out with empty seats,
Sure.
And which probably makes the world a little bit easier for you in a lot of different fronts. And then that goes up to what is probably the best and most generous, which is the customer size and extra seat policy. Now, again, there's a yucky part to this, which I absolutely hear from everybody, which is Southwest is saying it's okay to be like this, and we're just going to, allow, people of size to have a better travel experience than people who have stayed quote unquote healthy. Again, that's a blanket statement. That, again, this is the tough part about this topic to talk about. But basically, you can get a second seat in advance, and then after your flight, you request a refund of that second seat. You can board early, and if with open seating still on assignment right now, you can get a front row. You can get whichever row in the entire plane you want with 2 seats and be as comfortable as possible, and then get a refund for that, which, advocates would say this is great. This is a fantastic way to help those who need accessibility issues. People who are against this would say you're just encouraging people to be that much more unhealthy, which again is a tough blanket statement to put across. Certainly a lot, of us, I'm talking to myself here, can be more healthy, but I don't know, man. So it's kind of the policies, and I think really I agree with you to say go ahead.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to add on Southwest, which I think is what makes it even more generous than the others. If you're in a position where you can't buy a second seat, Southwest will give you a complimentary seat. It just may not be on the flight you're booked. So if you can only afford to book one ticket and you get to the gate and you're a person of size, you can approach the gate agent and say, hey, I'm not going to fit in one seat. And they'll tell you right then if you need 2 seats. And if you do, they'll move you to another flight. So you don't ever have to come out of pocket if you don't want to. Your travel plans could be disturbed, but they do give an option to make it free. where you don't even have to pay ahead of time and then get refunded. So that's where I think they are the most generous at handling this. And maybe it's because for a long time, Southwest was more of a leisure airline. So they were seeing more of the casual flyer that they have policies like this. I think we also know, maybe know is not the right word. I think our personal experience has been that generally speaking, I think Southwest crews are some of the friendliest crews. So it's not a shock that their policies might be a little more customer friendly here.
I get two takeaways from reading these policies. One's, I agree with you. The legacy carriers, have basically tried to make this as much of not their problem as possible so that nobody can point to the fine print. In Delta's case, no print at all and say, not our problem, which is a shame. On the other hand, if you are a customer of size, you got to do your homework. It's a part of your life that you have to go and read these policies. And if the airline doesn't have a clear policy, you need to call and make sure that you have done your homework so that when you get to the gate, you're not putting just like any of us. I would put this underneath the bucket of anytime we travel, we all have to do our due diligence regardless of what it is. And this is something that you have to do if this policy is going to be applicable to you, and not leave it up to the airline to tell you, hey, you got to buy a second seat. There's no second seat on this flight. Now you had to wait until a flight is available, and now you got to buy that second seat. Just to be clear, nobody except for Southwest is really giving you anything for free. Alaska conditional if the flight has an empty seat or not. So, you got to do your homework here if this is applicable. I would say, only one situation. Again, big guy myself, right? If somebody's going to be encroaching upon my seat, there's just no room to do that from both a knee and a shoulder standpoint. Last year, I cannot remember where I was flying, maybe 2 years ago. I got in a Embraer 175, was sitting in economy, boarded last because that's the way that you board flights. Nobody wants to spend an extra 30 minutes in that middle tube. I certainly don't. And Embraer is, there's only two seats, aisle and then two seats. I was going to my seat, and the seatmate next to me was just needed both of those seats. Like there was just absolutely no way that was going to happen, nor would I would not fit. Like there was literally no seat for me to sit on. So I went to the flight attendant and said, hey, look, there's just no way. And she quickly took a look. Luckily that flight was not full. So she was just looked at her phone thing real quick and was like, hey, these seats should be empty. So I just found another row. But if that flight was full, man, that was just going to be such an uncomfortable situation. But what I would do is I would not even approach that passenger. I would, have seen the problem coming down the aisle,
right?
Turned around, waited until I could get back upstream and said, hey, look, there's just no way. I need you guys to take care of this. I'm not going to go out back there and embarrass the passenger. But they would have had to have been placed on another flight. So tough, man. And again, the whole point of me bringing this up is it's just going to keep happening more and more until we make America healthier, which I think goes with that whole 3-hour conversation we could have about what that would take so that people can afford to be healthy in this country, which I think is a real problem. But then there also is certainly a personal responsibility aspect to this for a lot of people in this situation.
Yeah, I want to touch on a slightly different piece of this. It won't be the first time I've said something, less than friendly about an airline. God knows that plenty of things that we say on this show don't make us friends with airlines and hotel chains, nor will this. When you go back to the original story on Reddit that you read, let's be honest, and I won't put you on the spot. I've had so many experiences, and I'm speaking mostly from a United Airlines experience. I've flown plenty of Delta and American, but the majority of my last 5 or 6 years has been on United. I've seen so many experiences that are similar to this on different issues where policies aren't followed and nobody on the plane is held responsible for it. And a big part of that is just because there's very little supervision on board. Even the purser who might be in charge of the flight isn't necessarily in a position to write up their fellow employees for most things, or they just don't. And it creates,
especially if they have to spend the rest of that trip with them in the van, in the hotel, at the meals. Like it just creates a situation where the supervision is not wanted.
Yeah, and I think this is what comes down to, I think culture is such a big part of this. I think you and I would generally agree that Delta flight crews are better than American and United flight crews on a general basis. And I think they also have the least toxic of the three cultures from a union standpoint and a contract standpoint. They just got a huge profit sharing from the airline. They're the least unionized of the big three. But it's not just a union conversation, because Southwest is unionized and probably has the friendliest crews in the U.S. So culture is a huge part of this, because by nature it's going to be very hard to have oversight on these things. But I really struggle with how unenforced these policies are. And I'll touch on something else you sent this week, just as an easy example. You sent an article to one of our group chats about how American Airlines was quietly getting rid of the second beverage service and coach on longer domestic flights. And of course, I started laughing because I don't remember the last time I got a second drink in first class on United, let alone in coach. And it's just one of those things where, and this isn't to call out any specific crew, it's just very typical of what I see nowadays. I was on a 772 on the way back from Reno this time through San Francisco, and I want to say there were, fortunate enough to be in first class again. Went to go to the bathroom, and there were either 5 or 6 crew members in the galley about 45 minutes, an hour after we took off, after the meal service was concluded. And I couldn't get to the bathroom because, as you know, the bathrooms are up by the cockpit door, and so I have to get around them. So they finish their conversation and move and get out, and so I move out of the way. I go into the lavatory, do my business, come out, and my path is blocked again. And I'm just standing behind 2 flight attendants while they're all just having this conversation in the galley. And they know that I'm in the lav because I just had to pass them. And it's just really uncomfortable because they're all just laughing and joking around. And I'm just sort of standing there trying not to be a jerk about it, trying to get someone's attention. And then finally just have to, in a loud and sort of obnoxious way, say, "Excuse me," so that I can get back to my seat. Very few of them, maybe 1 or 2, ever came out of the galley for the rest of the flight, which was about 4 hours. That's pretty typical.
Typical. Yeah. Absolutely. On the American carriers, that's a typical experience.
Yeah.
You get good customer service, you're so surprised and refreshed by it, unfortunately. Yeah. I think it does go back to a complete lack of supervision. Now, this is not a blanket statement against people that work. I've had plenty of great experiences, but that is just a typical experience that any of us who are road warriors know. Once the initial beverage service is done, which, to be clear, is just such bare bones, that's an airline problem. That's not a flight attendant problem. That's the airline putting the flight attendants in, here's what you're going to serve. You don't see them again, right? They're gone. Even if it's a transcon flight, they're in the back of a single aisle hanging out, which, again, what should they be doing? I don't know. They're primarily there for your safety.
Well, yeah, the other thing... But think about this for a second, though. You've flown Southwest enough to know that, typically speaking, Southwest is one of the airlines that's religious about having at least one flight attendant sort of hanging out around the exit row while boarding is going on to help people, but also to give some level of guidance, don't do that, that's stupid, don't be a jerk, all that stuff. All the airlines used to do that. I don't see that very often on other carriers anymore. And so they're just in the galleys during boarding. So again, to your comments about people of size, all these sorts of things, if there's no flight attendants in the aisle, that's the last opportunity you're going to have to fix this before, the metaphorical Richard Kerr boards the flight, walks down the aisle, and finds out he can't sit in his seat.
I will say Delta on the A321s, which I fly back and forth to LaGuardia now, they always have a flight attendant by that middle lavatory there where there's space for them to hang out, which makes sense. And they're always great about keeping track of what's going on, just because there's some weird things on A321s with those middle exit rows and bags and all that kind of stuff. So Delta's really good about that, having the flight attendant in the middle. I would just also tell everybody, every time I pass that middle flight attendant, I make eye contact, I smile, and I say, "Hello, how is your day going?"
Yeah.
And you can just tell, man, how much they appreciate that, because most people boarding that plane are just got that airplane fog in their eyes that say, "I'm here to bite. I'm here to be defend. I'm here to get what I." It's why are we like that, man? I just don't understand. So I'll continue to be an advocate to everybody that the first thing you can do to be a professional travel hacker in any situation is smile and give a polite greeting of the day, regardless of how wronged you have been, or etc. I'll kind of conclude on this. I think we've beat this horse to death. This is going to continue to be a problem until America becomes a healthy country for a lot of different reasons. I don't think airlines are going to do anything about this until Americans speak worth their wallet, or plane manufacturers. So really 2 options, customer size. Do your research, get that second seat, or buy a first class seat, which I know expensive. That's the way it is. That's what, they're not going to do anything. And then, passengers, if you find yourself in a situation where your seat's being seriously encroached upon, I would encourage you to hold the airline to their policy and, as politely and as discreetly as possible, bring it to the purser's attention and don't let them shoo you away. If you're flying to San Francisco from Atlanta, you don't want half your seat gone. You paid for the full seat. You're entitled to that full seat for that flight. And please hold the airline again, as politely and as discreetly and as humane as possible. Make the airlines follow their policies.
Yep, I would agree. I think there's absolutely a humble and humane way to go about solving these issues if you happen to be next to a person who's encroaching on your seat. I think, as human beings, we should definitely, try to be as non-confrontational as possible in these situations as you can be. And hopefully you can find a good way to solve this. Clearly this person on Reddit ended up in a bad situation, which I think, I'm not surprised by in the least. And hopefully nobody else runs into that sort of situation. All right.
That applies to everything, by the way.
Yeah.
Just handle it as lightly as possible, everybody. Please be nice.
Well, and it goes back to something that you just said. Now, I did want to confirm it because I didn't comment on it. The smiling at the flight attendant in the aisle. I always greet the flight attendants getting on the plane. On United, they hand out sanitizing wipes. It's sort of like their thing. That's like Scott Kirby's. He wants you to know that they care about you, sort of thing. But I wear, I think you know this, but I wear this little necklace that the kids made me. I have a Boeing lanyard, and it has like some perla bead stuff that the kids made for me. And so that's sort of my icebreaker, because almost every flight attendant looks at it and says it's cute, and I tell them my kids make it, and it's just sort of like a disarming conversation. But I think, they're not expecting that. They're expecting to get their teeth kicked in because there's so many travelers that just aren't nice about it. They come with the guard already up. And to Richard's point, look, if you want to make things smoother, the first thing you can do is just be nice when you're traveling, because there's so many people that are just in a bad mood out there.
If you're looking for an upgrade, my secret tip: be nice. You stand out.
Richard Kurt's secret upgrade hacking.
Be nice. That will increase your chances from 0% to 0.1%.
I was gonna say be nice, and one time every 10 years you will get the upgrade.
I mean,
all right,
specifically for hotels, but yeah, not so much.
Yeah, there you go. Before we run out of time, I also want to talk a little bit about the Slack community. We've got a question from the Slack community to answer. Josh, who's a Slack member, asked a question about London, someplace Mr. Kerr is going shortly. For folks who don't know, Slack community is our way to help support the show. A lot of expenses bringing the show to video and doing all the stuff that we do. And so if you want to spend a few bucks a month or buy an annual subscription, you get access to travel experts like Mr. Kerr and I. We have a few happy hours a month, planning some meetups throughout the year to be a part of our community. And so Josh asks, looking at London with a family of 5, so we need 2 rooms. I just want to say, Josh, love having you as a member of the Slack community. If you love to travel, the choice to have 3 kids is just a really tough one. There's so many areas of the world that are not like the US where this just becomes a big issue. And so he says 2 separate questions. Staying 5 nights potentially at Hilton and want to use points. Would 5th night free apply to both rooms? If not, think I book them separately and call and have them joined as combined rooms. So first off, Mr. Kerr, you certainly had your fair share of trying to find rooms for the family of 4
as we speak
in Europe, and know that can be a problem. London's probably one of the easier places to find rooms for a family of 4, but with a family of 5, you're absolutely going to need 2 rooms pretty much everywhere in Europe.
Yep, that's true. So Hilton does a great job. You can book connecting rooms at the time of booking. You can use points, and then one of the members piped in and says 5th night free does apply.
Yep, on
both rooms.
That I can confirm.
Which is great. Some other things that people forget about, right? Hyatt has a family rate where you get 50% off the second room. Accor also has that, as I'm seeing on their website. Accor just, because they're so heavily based in Europe, they just have a lot of family rooms in some of these properties that are much more affordable than the quote unquote family rooms that other properties charge. So don't forget to ask about 50% off the second rate. Now, not every property is going to know exactly what you're talking about, but I find if you call the Hyatt reservation global desk that they're the best ones to help for that.
Yep, and as you noted, 5th night free does apply to multiple rooms. Hilton does a great job of offering connecting rooms. It's not as often that you'll find the connecting room option enabled on international reservations, but it is getting more prevalent on international. Almost every U.S. hotel, you'll see connecting room options if those are available. So that's the way I would go there, and I absolutely think 5th night free, especially for a place like Europe, is a huge value for Hilton Honors members. And since you mentioned Accor, on our way out the door, I will note that there are some pretty awesome bonus points promotions right now for Accor Live Limitless members. So if you are one of those folks who took advantage of the Built status match, I am one of those folks. As a newly minted Accor Platinum member, there are some ways to earn bonus points on your next paid booking for the next few months if you're going to be staying at an Accor property.
I'm looking forward to it, man, trying to nail down those Europe hotels as we speak. We're going to do 3 days in London. We're going to go somewhere else in the UK. Haven't decided where yet. If you got recommendations, let me know. Right now, leading towards Edinburgh. and then I will depart, and Emily and the kids will head off somewhere else in Europe. So always looking for those recommendations, but I am looking forward to trying Accor for the first time with my platinum status, getting some of these benefits, as well as, again, pretty easy to find rooms that will hold my family of 4 in their chain.
Yep. Yeah, I actually was headed up to that area. Unfortunately, I had to cancel the trip for some sad stuff, which you know about. But I was looking at Glasgow, and they have, easily half a dozen Accor properties that were all very affordable. There's some earning stuff there. Like some of the Accor brands don't earn at the same level as others, sort of like the Marriott system. So just check that if points earning is your deal. I don't necessarily think that most of us are going to earn our way to Accor status using paid hotel nights just because there aren't a lot of properties in the U.S. But plenty of $70, $80 a night rooms up in the Glasgow area, which is 45, 50 minutes from Edinburgh. So some options there for folks as well. Mr. Kerr, you getting on any airplanes this week?
To be determined, man. The weather continues to be iffy both here and in New York City, and the last thing I want to do is get stuck. But I have a lot of airplanes, a lot of New York City in my future.
All right. Well, I too have airplanes in my future, shockingly enough. We'll be headed back to Vegas later this week after the episode drops, someplace new for a change. So, yeah.
Both of us covering new territory early in 2025.
Blazing new trails, but still determined to meet in Orlando soon so that the glitter Mike can meet Sparkle Mike later this month.
Can't wait for it, man. I'm still playing some games there in Disney as well. But we won't talk about that because we want to avoid future 3-star reviews.
All right, Mr. Kerr, well, safe travels. Can't wait to catch up with you here later in January with parts of both of our families enjoying a little bit of time at that place that we won't talk about to get those 3-star reviews. I did enjoy digging into this topic. I think it's one, as you pointed out, that will challenge travelers for a very long time, and I hope that people find this helpful. We'll put links to all these policies in the show notes so you can find them if you need to reference them. And as always, if you have questions or comments that you want to share with us, you know how to find both Mr. Kerr and I. When we are not blazing new trails to New York and Las Vegas, you can find us here every week on the Miles to Go podcast. Until we upload again, we've got miles to go.
And we will spot the ball at the time of where I don't know.